I'm going to try to cover a lot of material here in a short period of time, just kind of glancing over a few of the items. But let's take a look at some of the utilities that are available to you for doing inventory adjustments. Now we are in the inventory module. Let's go to Utilities and down to Returned Found Inventory. I do find myself using this periodically for different purposes. This is good for receiving an inventory without an invoice. You don't want anything on the AP side. Maybe you've never had this record before, so you're trying to create an all new record, and maybe a rep has gifted you some material, a new kind of adhesive they want you to try out, and you're just trying to get it into inventory so that you can sell it on an order. This is, of course, basically it's the receiving and costing screen. It's just kind of a special version of it that allows you to create the inventory without then going over to the AP side. So we're just going to close out of that. Moving on to the next one here that we're going to look at is the Item Inventory Consolidation tool. Now, because of the resolution I'm using on my screen, I actually can only go so far with this, but this would be to take multiple records of, like, let's say grout, and combine them into one, so that it's just maybe a little bit easier for the person who's having to select inventory. So you could select all the grout that is the same, grab one of them, set that as the destination, and then take all the other records and wrap them up into that one. I frankly don't actually use this tool, but it is an option, absolutely. So we'll close out of that. Moving on to another one here, we've got the batch roll adjustment. This could be pretty handy. Again, this is not one that I personally use. However, no particular reason why not. Usually I just do this manually. This would be to scrap carpet rolls or any other kind of roll, I guess, that would be less than a certain length, so that you're not having all those little bits and pieces out there. Go ahead and cancel out of that. Primarily what I really want to show you is what I call the hammer and screwdriver, which we have right up here, which is for making adjustments. And I also want to show you an alternative to that. But starting off looking at the hammer and screwdriver, first we're going to jump over here to adjustments and adjustment types. Actually, adjustment types is what I'm interested in. Let's say that we want to set up a new type of adjustment specifically for items that are damaged by our warehouse, so that we can review those at the end of the month. So we could come in here and create a new adjustment type, and let's say we're just going to call that warehouse. And this box right here is actually locked. I don't believe I can do anything with that. So I click OK. Now I have my new adjustment type. So we're going to use that here in just a second. Let's say right here we've got this maroon 12 by 24, and let's say one carton of that has actually fallen off the pallet and we've had to throw that away. So we need to account for that. We're going to come up here to the hammer and screwdriver and take a look at what this screen looks like. So a few things here. Of course, we can change the adjustment date. I generally would not need to do that. We can also assign a customer invoice number. Now, that does not impact anything anywhere. It is informational only. As a matter of fact, you could put some other information there if you really wanted to. However, it's a relatively short field, so probably not of any use for anything other than the customer invoice number. All right, now we have here, these two boxes are going to play off of each other. The amount to adjust and the new amount available. If I change the value in one, then the other is going to change. Let's see if I can actually get that on the screen here. And let's say I'm going to adjust one carton, so then it's going to tell me how much is going to be left. If I were to, let's see, arbitrarily just change that to something else, then it's going to change the amount that we're adjusting. But let's say we are changing one carton. And then down here we have our adjustment type. So I'm going to go ahead and select our new warehouse adjustment type and click OK. All right, and when I do that, we can see now our quantity received, of course, stayed the same. We're now showing that we used one carton and have remaining the other looks like 6 cartons, I believe. All right, with that done, let's say later on we want to take a look at what kind of adjustments we've made during the month. We can come up here to Reports and Inventory Adjustments Report. And let's just set that for the beginning of the month through today. You can see that there are a few other options here if we want to look at a particular supplier, maybe a particular adjustment type. We could always do that, or we could leave the defaults, which is what I'm going to do. We could also select how we want it to be sorted. In this case, I want it sorted by adjustment type because I want to see in particular these warehouse adjustments kind of grouped together. Let's go ahead and click print and see what happens there. Okay, so now we can see all of our adjustments for the month, and we can see down here our warehouse type right here and how much money we have lost due to warehouse breakage, in addition to any other types of adjustments that have been made. Now, honestly, that's not the way that I usually do adjustments. I do have another way. I'll get to showing you that in a moment, but let's take a look at a few other adjustment types before we leave this screen. Okay, so let's say once again, for right now, we're going to say that we're dealing with 1 carton, but let's look at some of these other adjustment types. Now, most of these are just simple quantity adjustments. They're just simply different descriptions that are all going to basically do the same thing. So when we look at scrap, shortage would be possibly maybe when we remeasure a piece of carpet, or when we go out and count in the warehouse, we find out we're short. Maybe we used a piece for sampling. All of those are basically going to do the same thing. Transfer is a little bit different, so that one we're going to take a look at. And you can see when I select transfer, we get some more options to look at. And this is going to give us the option of transferring this to another item, which would simply be creating a new inventory record. This could be useful for certain purposes, kind of the opposite of the consolidation tool. This would be kind of a splitting tool, so to speak. We could also use the transfer for removing inventory. To be honest, I don't understand how that would be different than simply using one of the other adjustment types. And we can see here also we have the option of transferring to another store, so that if we do that, we can come down here and select a different store. Let's say we want to move this over to store C for some reason. We could always do that, as well as changing some additional information here, and then clicking OK. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and do that. And yes. Okay, and now we can see we now have a new record for store C with that material. The original line has now been reduced in quantity. Jumping over to roll inventory, let's say we want to make a change to this roll number. Now, if we double click this, we'll see that we don't actually have the ability to change that roll number. However, using the hammer and screwdriver, we can go to transfer and transfer to another roll, where we can now say that no, in fact, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and click OK, and it's going to move that over to a new roll number if perhaps we've made a mistake. And this is where maybe sometimes the adjustment tool is going to not work as well as you'd like it to. If I take this record, let's say that we have damaged 1 pail of wood adhesive, and we go to a hammer and screwdriver, and we go to the adjustment type, all of a sudden our list gets a lot shorter. We only have one option, is to transfer, and only to transfer to another store. This is something RFMS has set up, I believe, for kind of keeping the integrity of the data. Because this item right here is not costed, it's not letting us make any changes to it. So if we have a situation where we just brought in some material and then the very next day we need to make some sort of adjustment, we may either have to make a note to ourselves to do that later, or we may have to find another solution. Now, one last thing talking about the hammer and screwdriver, we're just going to jump over here to accounting, what's going to happen at the end of the month, we are of course going to close the journal, and when we do that, we'll notice that there's a box right here for include inventory adjustments. So with that selected, that is going to post those adjustments against the GL. It is going to post all of those adjustments against your cost of goods, and it's going to reduce the inventory. Anything more that you might want to have happen with that, you would need to do externally as a month-end adjustment. Let's say, for instance, we want to take that warehouse loss and we want to move it over to a different GL code, maybe something called warehouse losses. We would just simply do that manually. Now, there is an alternative to the hammer and screwdriver, and I did want to show you this because this was shown to me once by someone working for RFMS. I've gravitated towards doing this. This is the way that I've usually handled my adjustments. So I'm in here in claims, and I have a claim that I've already created, and I'm going to use this claim throughout the month. So if somebody does come to me from the warehouse and says, you know, we've had this damage and we need to adjust that out, all I'm doing is attaching it to this claim here. So I would go to Insert, and I could select that, choose the quantity. The price I'm leaving is 0. Now typically in a claim you're trying to collect money from somebody. There's nobody to collect the money from. We're showing this as a loss, so the price stays at 0. I'm going to put the status to cut, and I'm going to put a note on here. Now this is one benefit to doing this way, is that I can have a better note, as so that later on when we have to look at this, it's going to make a little bit more sense to us instead of just having a blanket adjustment without really any detail behind it. So there is that. The other benefit is that I can also do this for uncosted material. It's not going to adversely affect anything. And when we look at the job cost for this claim, we can see how much money we've lost during the month for, in this case, warehouse losses. We could also set up a claim for, let's say, samples that we're bringing in. Now that would give us the ability to track the samples as a PO, and also to, at the end of the month, we could do a month-end adjustment to take that cost from cost of claims, which is where this is naturally going to end up, and move it over to samples, or in this case to warehouse losses. And actually with that, I believe we are done. If you need more information, you can always go to rfms.com, visit their support site, or call the help desk.